Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of The Sweet House. I am sitting down with my friend, the incredible Mary Lawless Lee. You sound like a Wild Wild West cowgirl. That I love your name.
I don't really know. I mean, yeah, Mary Lawless Lee. Everyone always connects with the Lawless, which is why I wanted to take it as it was my maiden name that now is my middle name.
Yeah, I kept my last name, my maiden name, and then I just hyphenated it. And then no one thinks Sweet is the last name. So I always say I'm Jasmine Sweet, like something you eat. And then when I work with brands, they're like, can you send us your government name? I'm like, that is my government
For real.
name.
This is my name.
So you're a cowgirl and I'm sweet like something you eat. But,
Love it.
you know, together this team is moving forward. I really wanted to get into what is your favorite role? Because you do so much. You're an influencer. You are just a fashion icon in my book. You're an entrepreneur. You're a mom of three, which is your most prized role, in my opinion, because every time
Absolutely.
I see you, I say, Mary, how are you doing this? I'm over here just a mom of one, and I'm like, how are you making this happen?
And I always tell you, I'm barely surviving.
But you don't look like it. You don't look like what you've been through. So I have to know, what if you could name your title? What's your title?
I mean, you are right. My prized, most precious role is being a mom. I mean, I think being a mom has really taught me literally it touches every aspect of business that kind of fall into some of those other roles. And so, yeah, that's definitely the most special role and job that I've ever gotten to have. But I think where all of those roles meet is at this creator moment and the creativity. And that's really what, at the end of the day, I just want stuff where I can be creative and I can bring new things to life. And I think that's where I feel the most alive. And so, you know, being an author, that was amazing because, I love to write. I feel creative when I write.
You're an excellent
therapy.
writer.
That was a dream project. And I just I've always wanted to do that and to be able to accomplish that. And that was like creating through words. And so the design stuff and the store, it all falls kind of under that same realm of I feel inspired when I can create. And so it connects there.
Well, you are doing it all, and you are doing it all so seamlessly. But I know, even when I read your book, you go from childhood and those experiences and different influences in your life to where you are now, and kind of you took us through each step, which I loved because your book is so vivid. She is an incredible writer, you guys. So if you love to read, even if you don't like to read, I feel like this is written like a storybook, and I actually read it to Rain. So literally when I would rock her to sleep at night, I was reading because her pediatrician was like, I don't care what you read.
Just read.
So just read. As long as she hears you reading to her, she's good. So she read Mary Lawless Lee's book with Mom.
That's amazing.
Do your kids ever participate in your creative process?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm inspired by them.
Yeah.
Like listening to them and seeing the world through their eyes is really kind of like that. It gives me that refresh. It keeps me excited. It keeps me, I think a lot of times, especially in this industry, you can get really jaded. Yeah. And seeing the world through my kids' eyes, it really brings back that sense of childlike wonder. A lot of my book is about that. Yeah. That's kind of like the underlying theme throughout the book is that childlike wonder, and that growing up in East Texas and living life, running through pastures, like literally the Book of Narnia. It was so beautiful. That's kind of the major theme of remembering that, re-experiencing that again. And my kids are such a big piece of that for me.
It's so funny because I actually grew up in the country too. So so much of your book is my story. I literally grew up with no neighbors, and my mom still has our childhood house living out there in the middle of nowhere, and you can see all the stars and the pastures, and they're growing different crops right across the street from her house. And it is beautiful. It makes you really cherish the childhood that you had in that space, because now we're city girls.
It's magical. I go back there and I just look up. I look up in the sky at night, and it's just full of thousands and thousands of stars. And like you said, there's no one in sight. You can hear the crickets. You can hear
the bullfrogs. Yes. You said the toads. I said the bullfrogs. Yeah.
Same thing. I mean, fishing was such a big part of that for me.
Me too.
It really makes you appreciate it. And now I just want my kids to have those experiences too.
But I'm sure no one sees us as country girls, because we're just fashion and out here in the city and doing the glam stuff. But I loved that element of your story because it just brought some sort of peace to me when I was reading. I was like, oh my gosh, this book is evoking all of my emotions, and just like getting to know you on a deeper level through your writing was just such a good experience for me. But you are seen as this icon, at least for all of us that I know in Nashville. We all admire you so much, and I know women all over the world admire you too. So what does this mean for you? Do you feel that? Do you know that people look at you this way?
No. I mean, I just love what I get to do every day. I think my background being a critical care nurse and the juxtaposition really I feel really grateful that I love the autonomy and the entrepreneurship of what I get to do now. And there's never been a day where I take it for granted. I always feel like it could go somewhere. And so I think like there's this humbling, I mean, being as an entrepreneur, it's a very humbling experience because you kind of get your shit handed to you every day. Every day. And so, yeah, I've always just like and I'm being honest, like I feel really grateful for getting to be in the space and having the autonomy. I love creating. I love building a team. I love working with really smart, amazing people. And so I like, it doesn't feel like just me. I'm creating and building something really special with these amazing people around me. And now I get to do it with my husband. And so,
Was he working somewhere else before, and now he's full-time on your team?
So prior to this, he was at CEA. He was a music agent and touring. That's actually how we met, because I was previously represented by CEA. My past manager introed us. Oh. And we were dated for like, it was like barely a year, got married so fast. But yeah, he joined my team after the pandemic, and now he's CEO of Nemah. He basically runs the operational side of Nemah. And I mean, Nemah would not be where it is today, and we wouldn't be able to do what we do without him. It's really it's challenging. I'm not going to act like it's not. It's very challenging. With your spouse, but it's also been really amazing because there's no one else I can trust like I trust him. Yeah, and you can have the difficult conversations that you need to have. You don't have to tiptoe around. I probably should more than I do. Oh my goodness! But we love it, and we've it's been a learning journey for sure on how best to navigate separating our marriage versus our time at work, but. Ultimately, like I wouldn't have it any other way. Absolutely. So you were one of the first influencers. I feel like you were one of the first that we all like realized were like really out here killing it. You were the first, especially in Nashville, for People were definitely looking at me like, what is this girl doing? Why is she taking pictures of herself? They still do that. It's so wild. I'm like, it's 2023. Can y'all just get with the program? People are taking selfies. We're shooting content in the middle of the street. Get on with it. Yeah. But I just want to know, what's been your biggest takeaway as like one of the pioneers? Because I consider you cowgirl, Wild West pioneer. It just makes sense, Mary. I think, and we talk about this a lot in our office, and I constantly remind myself of this. I think it's important to evolve and grow. So I started Happily Gray 10 years ago. So I started it when no one was really influencing, and people were looking at you like you're crazy, like really crazy. And then also their Instagram and social platforms had just launched. And so like growing 50,000 in one day was really not that big of a deal. Like now you can't even grow 5. Exactly. It's non-existent, and there's multiple other platforms. And so I think it's twofold. The biggest lesson I've learned, evolve, like knowing, keeping that like state of mind where you're open-minded enough to evolve and let new things in, but then also staying in your lane, knowing your brand DNA. There's so many new things. I mean, Threads just launched a few weeks ago. There's so many new things that have happened just in the last year. You have, it's not possible for you to do everything. And so you really have to know who you are, what your brand is, and your why behind what you're doing. So to be able to can be consistent with that brand DNA, but then also open-minded enough to continue to evolve and stay relevant.
Do you ever feel overwhelmed with everything?
Absolutely. Oh my God, every day. Absolutely. I mean, the social media side of it, I definitely do. And I mean, if I'm being honest, there's been times where, you know, I'm over it. Like, especially now having 3 kids or even just having 1 kid, because I think we live in a culture and a society where it's hard to find balance. It's hard to turn it off. I talk about that a lot in my book of like where those boundaries live and how to stay consistent with them, because it's really, really difficult, especially now when I really want to prioritize my time and give that to my kids.
And there's only so much time in the day. I know you were dropping one of your kids off this morning, and I did too. I got up at 6 and then I had to get myself together and get Rain together. And that is a whole fiasco.
Oh my gosh. The mornings.
The mornings they literally are the wild, wild west. I'm like lassoing Rain.
I mean, my 2-year-old, I have a 4-year-old, 2-year-old, and 13-week-old. And the 2-year-old literally every morning wakes up at 5:30 and tells me he's pooped in his pull-up.
Oh my gosh.
That is how the mornings start, like truly every single morning. He's a boy and he's just like very consistent. But it's, you know, it's wild. But it always, for me, like if you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And I always think of that, because it's, you know, if I'm choosing to spend this hour in this day like this, it's going to affect, you know, how the rest of my day looks. And so I think.
Do you deal with any mom guilt around it?
Absolutely. You know, it's hard. It's hard finding that balance. I think that's what I appreciate the most about my job now is the autonomy of being able to kind of dip in and out. If I want my, you know, 4-year-old to come to work with me and sit on the couch with an iPad, like, you know, like there's moments and more flexibility in this job that I'm able to have those touch points with my kids, and I never take that for granted. But it's mom guilt. It's really hard.
It's a real thing.
Understand it until I experienced it for myself.
I didn't either. I was like, mom guilt. Like, I think before I became a mom, it was such a far-fetched term for me, or just ideology. But now, espespecially working mom life, it's that balance is a whole nother level of trying to figure it out. I called my sister yesterday after I got done filming 2 episodes of The Sweet House, and I still had like 3 meetings and just all the things. And I knew I had to pick Rain up by 4 p.m. And I had to then be mom until she goes to bed. I was just like, oh my God, like, I don't even know who I am today.
It's like, a lot. It is a lot. You know what we've found? We found that just more recently too, with adding more kids, having friends in your community group that value the same things you do and that understand like, hey, I don't really have a social life right now. Like, and if we're doing something socially, it's going to be with all my kids. And having friends that are like-minded in that way, that they want to do stuff with kids, your kids are friends with their kids. We found that to be, you know, really helpful, and feeling like we've got those adult touch points outside of work. But then also, you know, we have this beautiful community of friends and kids being able to play. And
so it's like this, its own little universe of support. So
oh my gosh, you have to have that support.
You have to, for sure. I definitely think like where you live, like your neighborhood, like just all of that. Like, you being able to have some self-care time, all of it. But I want to shift to you building your incredible team that keeps all of this flowing. And I'm just curious to know when you knew you needed a team, and then how did you go about adding people to the team or subtracting? Well, because let's face it, when you're in business, you got to do both.
And I think one of the biggest things is you learn from each person you bring on, and no matter how, you know, which way it falls, whether that person is leaving on a good note or a bad note, I always ask, hey, feedback. Like, what was the best thing? What was the worst thing here? What can we do better? Because I think that as a leader, as a founder, you have to, that's our job to learn from each experience. And that only enriches, you know, making you a better leader, but also your team better. And so we brought on a culture business coach that has really helped me with that. And, you know, you're only as good as your leader, and everything really is top down. And so I'm always reminding myself of that. But You know, having a team when you're really at the point of wanting to scale is crucial. Like, it's probably the most important aspect. Like, I know everyone always says like, oh, I hate managing people. Like, it's the hardest part of my job. And that is true, but it's also the most important part, especially if you're at that point of scaling. And I mentioned this earlier too. I think what I've learned is hiring the right people for the right roles, even if you have to pay more, there's going to be more longevity and a bigger yield to that. And, you know, you have to have, in order to scale, you have to have the right people that are making the right decisions. And you know, if you don't, then your company won't see that growth. And
have you ever had a situation that you hired somebody and they just didn't deliver for you, and you just felt like just discombobulated in a sense?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I would, you know, I think that now we do this practice where before we hire anyone, everyone takes a judgment index test, and it kind of breaks down personality strengths and weaknesses. Because I think at the end of the day, it's about knowing how that person works, how they work as a part of a team. How are they going to take feedback? How are they going to take criticism? Where their strengths lie. And so I really feel like it's, you know, you definitely, like I said, you have to learn from each one and take that into the next hire. We spend a lot of time on hiring. It's something that I used to kind of, you know, do a few interviews for, like, okay, I think this person is the right fit. But now the process is a lot more structured. There's multiple rounds of different people on our executive team. They talk to our business coach. There's that like personality index assessment. And so, like I said, I've learned in the last 2 years, it's such a crucial aspect of the success of the overall business is having the right people around it. So it really is important taking that due diligence.
Round about how many people do you have on your team now?
There's 9 of us. But that's split between 3 different companies. So we have Nemah, which is our mom and baby skincare brand. And really that team is, the whole company is so bootstrapped. We're so scrappy. There's about 3 of us over there. And then we have our retail, Happily Gray, Shop Happily Gray. It's retail and e-commerce. And then we have the brand side of things. So our brand partnerships, MLL is what we call it. And so between those 3 different companies, there's 9 people. We have a few agency, like fractional work, but it's really, just all 9 of us.
Do you guys do like a lot of team building exercises with each other and cross communicating with work and everything?
Oh, I mean, yes, we live and operate on Asana and Slack. And so there's a few of our roles work both on Shop Happily Gray and Nemah. And so there's a lot of crossover and teams discussing. We have a lot of team meetings. We've really amped that up this year. We have an executive team meeting, we have marketing meetings, we have every week there's 4 or 5 meetings that are every single week. And that's been really good because I think people need really structured frameworks to work in, and they need that structure from the top down. I'm a creative at heart, and so sometimes it's hard for me to like stay consistent to that. You know, I get excited about ideas and then I just like run with stuff, but then I have to remind myself like, oh wait, this is the editorial calendar. This is what we're operating under.
These don't get ahead of yourself. We're going with.
Because you will make other people that don't operate like that crazy.
Oh, absolutely.
Crazy. And I've learned that.
I'm wondering how many of them like brought like grand expertise to the table, or did you give them the guidelines? Because that's something I struggle with. Like even when I hired my nanny, I'm like, I gave her a nanny handbook because I'm like, you need to follow these guidelines. I don't care what you did at such and such's house. But I don't know, as a leader or an owner of a company, do you feel like you find yourself giving them more so what they're going to do? Or are you hiring people that are coming in with like grand expertise to run the jobs, to offer up like products like knowing how to use Slack or knowing how to use Asana or other project management tools and stuff? Are they coming with that? Or
so your nanny. I agree with that. Cause like, there's no, I mean, you're going to be hands-on and like probably micromanage that, and you're their parent. So that's expected. I'm that same way, as well with my team. You know, like it really is transitioned. I feel like now we're hiring people that are experts in the field that I'm able to learn from. I always heard, someone told me this piece of advice years ago, and they said, hire women that are smarter than you.
Yes.
And, you know, I think what we've learned, like kind of really going back to that, is in order to grow and scale a company successfully, like I can't be everywhere and in everything. I can't be an expert at everything. Like e-commerce, I know a little bit of it. I don't know it. I'm not an expert. You know, the retail side, I know a little bit. And so it's been our goal to hire experts in those fields that we can say like, hey, we want to give you a lot of autonomy in this space. We want you to teach us. We want you to come in with strategy and structure
and you lead the way.
Yeah. And not everyone can be those impact players on your team because, you know, with that comes higher salaries, that level of expertise and experience. And so I found that you really need both on your team. You need people that are excited to be guided and are excited to fall under that leadership and learn. And then you also need those impact players that are going to really be able to guide and lead when you can't.
Absolutely.
So it's a bit of both, honestly.
It's a balance. Yeah. So Shop Happily Gray is e-commerce, you guys. So go shop it. And then it is also brick and mortar here in Nashville in L&L Market. And when a lot of shops close down, especially after the economy and just everything that we've been going through the past few years, you have managed to keep Shop Happily Gray thriving. So I'm just curious to know what made you want to stick with brick and mortar and how have you been able to make it keep consistent?
Well, if I'm being honest, I mean, thriving, we've had our ups and downs. And we opened 2 months before the pandemic, completely shifted our buy and our focus because no one was buying apparel. I had just bought thousands and thousands of dollars worth of clothing. And so it was, you know, a huge learning curve there through that whole experience. But in a way, it really strengthened us because it made us really put our e-commerce under the microscope and really evaluate, you know, how's our e-commerce running? I come from a digital platform. That's where my community is online. And so it only made sense for that to be like, you know, our strong foundation. And so we're about 60% e-commerce, 40% retail. I love a physical. The store is really a physical experience to a digital brand. I love, people being able to come in and feel the brand and hopefully feel that sense of discovery. Like we intentionally don't put brands that are in Nordstrom in our store. I try to source stuff that's in Europe, stuff that's in New Zealand, Australia, like all over, and stuff that just feels unique and different. And so, you know, it's a learning curve because, you know, in order to keep the lights on, there's money and resources that go around it. But again, like we just hired a retail manager that's got a lot of good experience in that lane. We have someone that is he's a director of e-commerce, so he's more focused on that. And so what I've figured out is you can't just in the past, I have thrown a manager at all of it and been like, hey, run the online business, run the retail business. But you really have to understand they're two totally different things at the end of the day.
And you can tend to stretch, even though they may have the skill set to do it, you can stretch people thin because that's not their expertise. Completely. Maybe they're a manager of something else, but they're not a manager of retail. Or they're a manager of retail, brick and mortar, but not a manager of e-commerce.
Totally. And they're two totally different jobs.
Totally different things, yeah.
And I mean, also there's the fact too of like your business has to get to a certain level and to be able to even afford to hire out those two positions. And so it's about the balance till you get to reaching those goals and then continuing to put the right people in the right places. But we love having a store. It's something we're trying to really grow our footprint in Nashville, but really the bulk and like our bread and butter is e-commerce.
Mary throws the best events. Anytime she's got a launch for something.
I love a fun event.
Yeah, I love a fun event too. But back to you having the brick and mortar store is kind of an experience. You always have a good experience whenever you throw your events too. I'm like, yes. Anytime I get an invitation from Mary's team, I'm like, of course I'm coming. I'm coming to lunch. What do you mean?
I love Nashville events. Nashville shows up. People show up. It's such a different experience going to an event in Nashville versus New York or LA.
Yeah.
Like it's people show up, they're excited to stay. Like you have to run them out of the door.
Yeah.
Because I feel like women really
want to connect.
They want to connect
Yeah.
and they want to support each other here.
I feel like, but you do a good job of inclusivity. Like you always choose a diverse audience, which I appreciate. And so, because I believe that we, in order to genuinely connect, we need to be from different backgrounds
100%.
and just be able to have different conversations. Like I've gone to your events and I've met women from all over and just had different stories and are at different places in their lives, kids, no kids, husbands, no husbands, from different places. And it's just always such an intimate space that you're cultivating. So I appreciate that too. And I don't know if your team is like sourcing these women to like bring to these events, but I love it because it's, to me, it's that strategy too. It's like, it's bigger than you just being this online voice. You're also practicing what you preach in person, which is not something that's typical for influencers.
We do it collaboratively, but you said it the best a second ago. Like we all have something to learn from each other. And if the same people are, I mean, I feel like in the beginning of influencing, like 8 years ago, the events I showed up to, it was literally the same people.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, here we go again. How are you doing?
Yeah.
And I think it's exciting.
And most of them won't even say, how are you doing? It's
Exactly.
like, yeah, because influencer life can get strange too, y'all. Some people are great online, but they're weird in person.
True.
Like,
Just
being
true.
real about it.
It's so true though.
Yeah.
It really is. But for me, like I want to connect with real women. Like you don't have to have 1 million followers. It's not, I think now we live in a world where if we haven't learned anything lately in the last few years, it's that we need people from different backgrounds and different experiences sitting at the same table and us learning from each other.
Yes.
And that is the opportunity for us to learn
and being
from each
able
other.
to ask the awkward questions and just like make sure that our children are also being exposed and just all of these things. So I appreciate it. I'm like, yes, Mary, this is great. But that makes me want to move to your experience as an ICU nurse. I can't talk today.
I get
your
it.
experience as an IC. Look, mom life starts taking over. Your mom brain starts taking over. You start saying crazy stuff. But anyways, for a significant part of your career, you were an ICU nurse. And there was one part in your book when you mentioned a story about a man named Charles. And I just have to read it because Charles reminded me a lot of my late father, the way he went out. And I'm going to read this because it was just so touching. And again, I'm like, Mary's book is so vivid, and I'm just sitting there reading this to Rain. Well, she don't know what I'm talking about. She's like probably in her head like, but I'm reading this and I'm like, man, like your heart is just so like rich, and I just really appreciated it. But you say, I lost Charles around midnight. He gotten a valve replaced and went into cardiac arrest out of nowhere just hours after the procedure. His family had been allowed to see him once in recovery while he was sedated and peaceful with a half smile on his face. They delighted in the rising and falling of his belly, the color in his cheeks, and how strong he looked. I liked them right away, but I like all my families. The kids called him Daddy, even though they were all grown and graying. They joined hands and prayed over him in one swift motion, like it was something they'd done together hundreds of times before. They talked about a house at the lake they'd take him to when he was all better. And his wife asked me about the IV pole and the numbers on the screen. She wanted to know if it was okay to touch his hand and his hair. Nobody knows the rules when a person they love is asleep, not quite a part of our world or the next one. And so that was so touching for me because when my dad passed, we actually, all 5 grown kids, I'm the youngest of 5, and then my mom, they'd been married for 44 years. We stood around him, and I just remember like we all sang and we prayed, and they told us that he was going to be transitioning, and we were with him when he took his last breath. And I just remember holding his hand, and my mom was asking the nurses the same questions, and it was not like a negative experience. So even my view on death, it even changed after that, because it was just such a serene and just higher power. This is God's land. This is he's in full control here. And it's awesome to have like nurses like you that also understand that power and the gravity of what happens in those situations. So when you wrote this out so vividly, I'm like, yes, that is exactly exactly what happened. All the nurses on our floor were like, we've never seen this before. And they were all crying, and they were probably crying harder than we were.
And they remember that. They'll never forget that.
They won't. And even the priest came in. They went to go get the priest, and he came in and he was crying, and we were all just singing and until my dad took his last breath. And so you wrote this and you talk about the impact that this guy Charles had on you, and I just thought it was so ironic and just divine intervention that you and I are having this kind of same experience, because my dad's situation was also cardiac related, and it's just wild. Don't you think that's wild that like
it is? And you know, that those memories, that's why they're in my book, because they are like engraved into my soul. My time as an ICU nurse, there's just never anything like it. I've never been so close to life and death. I didn't know death could be so beautiful. And it also like really makes you appreciate and value the things that you should. I mean, you really, in just the glimpse of a minute, it can be a different story. And life is so precious. And it never felt so, in that environment, it was so real and it was so raw. And you're just not promised that next second.
And I tell everyone, like, now that I've experienced that and then also given birth, because Rain was born on the day that my dad passed. So, she was born. So he passed in 2016. And then she came on the day we buried him. So she came 11/21/21. And it was so crazy because I was in the hospital for 3 days. And then she decides to come on the day we buried him. And I'm like, the connections between life or birth and death, and just all of it, the gravity of all of it is just so crazy.
It really is. That 7 years is 7 years in my life that I probably learned more than I ever will. And it gave me so much perspective.
Yeah.
I miss that side of it. That's what I remember so fondly. And I miss that patient care and connecting with those families. And it's a really beautiful, difficult time.
Would you ever go back?
I don't think so, because I love being in the space, the entrepreneur space. I love the energy of it, and it excites me. But I think what I miss most about nursing is the patient care. And my hope is what we're doing with Nemah, that in a way we're still helping people, bringing mom solutions, in a way that kind of connects back to that nursing world. And so I don't really feel like I have to be in a hospital at the bedside
to provide that level of care.
Yeah. And genuinely with Nemah, that was what inspired our skincare brand for moms and babies, is that we, I hope that I can connect those dots of like those big special moments that I felt as a nurse, and being able to care for people and provide like really, amazing, clean products and a community of support for moms. And so in a way, that's like Nemah for me has, with my nursing background, that's what it's really become.
I think that that's a valuable lesson for people to also get from this episode too, and just your life in general, is that like wherever you are, the dots do connect. Like you went from being an ICU nurse to being an influencer, a blogger, a fashion icon, and all of these different roles, a mom, a wife, and all these things, but they all make sense, because I think sometimes when people are doing one thing, it's easy to feel like this is for the rest of your life. This is it.
Totally.
And it doesn't have to be it. It can also manifest into Nemah. It can manifest into Happily Gray. It can manifest into all these things. And I just think that that's the cool part about your story.
I always remind myself, seasons are temporary, whether they're good or bad, and I always I'm a big, write a lot of things down. This is why I wrote the book, because I love to write, but I always those long-term goals, those long-term visions. I think I always tell people you should have both. Have your short-term goals that really drives your day-to-day, but then always come back to your long-term goals, and your short-term goals should be built upon what that long-term vision is. And reminding yourself that when you feel like you're running in place, or you feel like, I'm not getting anywhere, but I've got my head down working like a maniac.
Yeah.
You are getting somewhere.
Right.
You're going to have those seasons where it's going to feel like that. And I think in the last 5 years, I've had enough of those seasons that I'm starting to like understand and get a little bit more used to those feelings. But it definitely isn't like, oh, clear, like, oh, this dot, we're going to connect this and this. And
right,
one day I'm going to do this. And it's, you know, you learn a lot. And I think you realize like there's periods where it's hard and
there's stillness and it doesn't feel like it's moving forward.
But those moments are so important because you learn a lot, but it's always like reflective, right? Like you're always like retrospectively looking back and you're like, oh, that's why. And so I always try to remind myself of like, stay in it, keep your head down, like you're getting somewhere. And, you know, as long as you really know what that long-term goal is and you have passion for it, like I try to like, you know, keep encouraging.
The tunnel vision.
Encourage myself to stay down.
No, for sure. And speaking of Happily Gray, where you write all these beautiful words as well, so you guys go check out happilygray.com. You mentioned newborn life is everything all at once. Even through the magic of our bubble, I'm quickly reminded how raw and tender these first few weeks of postpartum are. As women, we are sold a fairy tale, and so much of it does feel to be just that. And there's also another reality to pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. As a mother of 3, still getting used to that one, and someone who has been in both places, it's important to me to share both sides. Ultimately, it can be the fairy tale bliss and a complete crash at the same time, and that's okay. And I loved that statement that it can be fairy tale bliss and a complete crash at the same time, because that's exactly what was happening with me this morning.
I was about to say, do you feel that as a mom?
Yeah,
I felt so much.
Yeah. And I just wonder what advice you would give to a new mom or someone in postpartum or anybody just navigating motherhood. Like, your journey is unique to you. Don't look at the next person beside you and think your journey has to look like that. Let it be what it's supposed to be. And it's going to be hard, and that's okay. It's going to be beautiful in those moments, and really celebrate those moments. But don't feel like you have to put your experience into this box and that it should look that way. As a new mom with my first, I was like, okay, we're doing this, we're going to do that. She's going to be this way and I'm going to be this way. I had this vision. And I think with motherhood, there's so much you can't control, and that's why it can be really hard. But I think that's the lesson is that you're creating your own unique path for you and your family. So lean into that. And the other thing too, is I will say that's been so important for me as a mother is support, community of support. And it doesn't have to be like this whole, slew of people. Like you can have two people, a sister and a friend, or 2 friends, whatever that looks like. You need to have someone that you can call and vent to and be honest with. Someone that can come over that can, I feel like I just want to encourage moms to be honest, because I think a lot of times we're thinking things, stuff is just staying in our head. Like I think I'd say stuff to my husband that I didn't say out loud, but I needed to say it out loud. And I'm like, I thought I told you X, Y, and Z, and you didn't say it because you're so inundated with like all the things you have to do and the things, the day to day. And so I think it's, having like that call with my sister yesterday and just being like, this is what's happening. And she's like, girl, I am in Dallas and my 2 kids are in Houston with my nanny. And I'm flying to Tennessee to go to our family member's funeral. And then I'm going to Bermuda to meet my husband. And then I'm going back to Dallas.
So
back to Houston. She's like, you're going to be fine.
You can do this.
Yeah. She's like, you can do this. I'm doing it too. Yeah. And just to have somebody say, I'm doing it too. It makes me feel like I'm in a band. And like, we're going to make this perfect harmony, no matter if it's like a bunch of clashes and doesn't sound good right now.
Completely. So, having someone that says, hey, I've been there, you're not alone. Gosh, it really does alleviate so much of that. Like,
it gives space for honesty. Yeah. Because otherwise you just feel like I think when I first became a mom, I'm like, well, how honest can you be about like what you're experiencing and just like without people feeling like you're being negative or just being a negative Nancy pretty much. But
there's so much strength in stepping into that vulnerability.
Yeah.
Like it's empowering.
Yeah.
Being able to say like, hey, I'm not okay. I'm struggling with this. Like, I think that helps and strengthens all of our journeys together.
Yeah. I mean, and you were very honest about your C-section, which I think a lot of times with the unexpected outcomes of birth too, a lot of times we can just feel just overwhelmed with all of that. And you say in unhappilygray.com, I think you also mentioned this in your book too, if I recall, with my first C-section, I didn't recognize myself. I felt like a failure. I'd lost a sense of home in my own body. I never talked about it. We need to talk about it. And so I think it's so important, again, that we are honest and able to have these discussions. What are your thoughts on it?
No, for sure. And that's why I wanted to share it in my book. I was scared to say that initially. You know, you bring your new baby home and you're like, everyone's like, oh, you must be so happy and joyful and
over the moon.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's hard to, you know, I think even for yourself to come to terms with like, wait, I don't feel that way though. What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
You feel weird. You're like, I know I'm supposed to feel this way. And for me, I had a C-section and, you know, I had planned out what my natural birth was going to look like. And all of that, you know, went to shit. And it wasn't until 3 nights when we were home, that third night of being home, that I just got in bed and I sobbed. I just started sobbing. And at first I didn't know where it was coming from. And then kind of like settling in, like turning internally, thinking like, what is happening? And it was all related to, I felt it physically and through my scar. It was related to that plan not going the way I envisioned it to go. And I think, you know, that is for me, that's been the biggest lesson of motherhood, of
I was like
releasing that control and knowing that it's okay. Like I'm learning a whole new path here.
Absolutely. I was like that. I had preeclampsia and I didn't get it until the end of my pregnancy. So 36 weeks.
That's so scary.
Yeah. And so here I am and I'm like, I eat lettuce. I run 3 miles a day. What do you mean I have high blood pressure? I'm like, and then having a father who passed of cardiac stuff, I was just like, what do you mean?
It's such a subjective experience. Like what our bodies do during pregnancy, you just never know. You can't control it. It's different from mom to mom, and it's different from baby to baby with the same mom, like how your body responds to that experience.
Yeah, but I think it's so important for us to have the conversations about how we internalize it and process it. Because I like you're talking about, you felt it through this scar. I felt it through grief of my father, and then also just the fact that I'm like, man, I'm physically doing everything that I can possibly do to not have to encounter this. And I had a fairly good pregnancy, so when I got to the end and end up with a preeclampsia, I'm like,
what the heck?
What the heck? Yeah,
what just happened?
Yeah, and I just remember like crying to my doctor, like, why me? And she's like, honey, some people wear contacts. Like, I've told this story a million times, but she's like, some people have asthma. Everybody has something. So you're gonna be fine. But I think
you will
it's
survive.
But it's just knowing that you're not alone and that you will be fine. Like women are having C-sections, it's fine. Yeah. Like women are going through things, all kinds of things. Men are going through things too. Dads are also transitioning quite a bit. And I know, you know, I'm sure your husband's been very vocal about just like life transitions as a father. And it's important that we take note of them too, for sure.
For sure. Yeah. My husband has like every morning, or not every morning, usually every week, him and a group of guys get together. They're all dads. They have coffee. I have no idea what they talk about, but I think like those sort of things are important, you know, for him to connect. We got to encourage
them to do it too.
Completely. And to have that time away, to be able to step away and like, you know, clear your head a bit.
Yeah.
Because I think so much of it is at times focused on the mother, because the mother's so central to the family. But you're right, like they're like your biggest support. So you got to make sure that they're
good too. Yeah. My husband does a basketball league. He's got a podcast. I
didn't know he had a podcast.
Yeah, he has a podcast with 2 of his best friends.
That's amazing.
They both played in the NFL, and it's like a big deal now. So you guys go check out the Raw Room.
I cannot wait. I love a good podcast.
Oh my God, they're hilarious. You will laugh like nobody's business.
Okay, I love that. Every morning when I'm getting ready, or if I'm in the car without kids, I'm listening to podcasts.
Oh, well, don't listen to it with the kids, but but they're when you mentioned that when I thought motherhood was breaking me, it was busy healing, teaching, and welcoming me. With each birth, did you feel more prepared, healed, and taught, and just welcomed into motherhood? Did it get easier for you?
I think it got easier just because I my approach and my outlook in entering into it has been totally different. Like how it was in my first and my third. Like my third, I went in with a lot of like, okay, what's meant to happen is going to happen. I have to have trust in my body and this baby. And I think I felt more at ease because I knew that ultimately I can't control, and I'm just going to try to show up the best I can. But it's also terrifying bringing home your third child, and like we're outnumbered now. So it's, I had this ease in some aspects, but then in other aspects it was like, I don't know what this is going to look like. We have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and now a newborn. Like, how are we going to operate? And, I think like a big part of that for me, I can be really hard on myself. I can be really critical. And so another thing motherhood has taught me is give yourself grace. I know that little line goes around a lot and a lot of people say it, but really like going easy on yourself, you're doing the best you can is at the end of the day is such a great reminder. And what I have to really tell myself, because you have those wins and you have those losses, and everything is an experience to learn from. But I was more at ease for sure because I knew the ropes. But
yeah, for sure. And honestly, I feel like the way that I give grace to myself is also giving grace to other moms. Like when I see a mom in the airport and I'm traveling, like I was traveling without Rain, and I saw a mom and she had an 18-month-old, and I was like, you're doing a great job, mama, because she needed to hear it. I needed to hear it. So for me, I try to choose like showing ways of empathy for other mothers, and that allows me to give myself some grace, because it's like an out of body, like, let me acknowledge the strength that it takes to do what you're doing.
Completely.
So I have to ask you, because Nemah Baby and Kids is coming soon.
Yes.
So tell us a little about Nemah Baby and Kids. That was Rain's first modeling shoot.
Oh my
Rain
gosh.
has been asked to do other shoots, and I will not let her do them. So I was like, Mary has asked, so Mary gets Rain.
She's the cutest thing ever. Like my whole team was dying over her. I mean,
oh my gosh.
She's so cute. I have never been more excited about it. Like my whole body just like, I can barely sit here. I've never been more excited about a product launch.
Yeah.
From the beginning, Nemah was a collection of clean skincare for mom and baby. And we've been working on those baby products for the last 2 years, and we're finally now here. And so a lot of, especially in like the product development, you start working on these products like years in advance. And so now to be at this stage, like, okay, we're finally here. We're putting the final touches on all the marketing, the design, the story of it. And I'm just excited to be able to finally share it.
I'm excited. It looks vibrant, and I know the quality of the products is going to be great. So I'm excited for it.
I was excited to bring something to life that wasn't like neutrals and stars and rainbows. Like I wanted something that felt outside the box, something different, something unique. And so we custom made these bottles, and just the look and the feel of, you were there at the campaign shoot. You kind of saw we were doing crazy stuff. And I hope that people will connect with that. And I hope that, most importantly, I hope kids will connect with that. I hope they're going to see these products. And I mean, yes, as moms, we'll love the clean science-backed formulas, but I hope that the kids will see it and feel it and want to just
be interact with it.
And have fun with it. Cause I think like, if anything, I love my black, I love my neutral tones and that elevated clean look. But with kids, we wanted to bring to life a story of this childlike wonder. We wanted it to be spunky and fun and interactive.
Well, I think you captured all of that.
I hope
you
so.
guys, you have to follow Mary Lawless Lee on Instagram, and also check out happilygray.com, because she leaves the most beautiful and encouraging words there. You also have to stop by the Happily Gray store here in Nashville. It's in L&L Market. And you also have to pick up Happily Gray, the book. And you just have to keep in touch and follow Mary Lawless Lee, because she is lassoing it all. And we're just grateful that you stopped by the Sweet House to share all this good advice with us. Thank you for
so
coming.
Much. I adore you and love you and admire you for all that you do, and as you operate as a mom and navigate it all. And I'm excited to be here.
Me too. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.